Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. We are back to estate planning of the rich and famous, where we chat about celebrities and their estate planning. Today's episode is on Tony Hsieh, and you may or may not immediately recognize Tony's name. He was most known for being the CEO of the online shoe and clothing store Zappos. And we'll go into his other ventures here in a few, but let's dive into Tony personally before we dive into his estate following his passing. According to his Wikipedia page, Tony was born in Illinois, shout out to the Midwest, but he and his family, which included his father, mother, and 2 siblings, moved to California when Tony was 5 years old. Tony attended Harvard University for computer science and graduated in 1995. The following year, in 1996, he co-founded a company called Link Exchange. And just 2 years later, Link Exchange was sold to Microsoft for a whopping $265 million. Whoa. In 1999, a friend of Tony named Nick Swinmum approached Tony and another friend of theirs about selling shoes online. And a mere 2 months later, Tony joined Zappos as the CEO, and Zappos kicked things off in 2000 with a $1.6 million in total sales. 9 years later, in 2009, Zappos' revenue got to $1 billion. Billion with a B, like boy, billion. In mid-2009, Zappos was acquired by Amazon for approximately $1.2 billion. Supposedly, Tony made around $214 million from the acquisition. And even though the acquisition happened, Tony stayed on board as the CEO and retired in August 2020 after 21 years. There were a few other ventures that Tony went on post-Zappos, including selling and investing in real estate in Nevada, in Utah, etc. But the point in all this is to say he sure was quite a successful businessman. In late 2020, still according to Tony's Wikipedia page, Tony was involved in a house fire that occurred at or around 3:30 a.m. in Connecticut while visiting family. After Tony was discovered, he was transported to a hospital where he later succumbed to his injuries and passed on November 27th, 2020. And if you're keeping everything straight date-wise, you'll realize this came a mere 3 months following his retirement from Zappos. According to Las Vegas Review-Journal, the local fire marshal shared that there was, quote, physical evidence to lead investigators to theorize that Hsieh could have been impaired or intoxicated at the time of the fire, end quote. And there is so much talk following Tony's passing about his mental health. Much of the court records showcase this. And if you just take 5 minutes and start looking into Tony's estate case, Tony personally, and what he was doing in the years leading up to his passing, you'll see what I'm talking about. According to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, another real estate investor explained that Tony's behavior was considered to be known by many, but that its extent was, quote, a little surprising. Because mental health is not talked about enough, I think it's important to shine some light on it. I'm going to read how the Las Vegas Review-Journal begins their article. They say, quote, Tony Hsieh needed help. The Las Vegas tech mogul's drug use, delusional thinking, and erratic behavior has prompted longtime friends to arrange a trip from his new outpost in Utah to a Montana ranch, where prior visits had proved to be helpful. When it came time to leave, Hsieh boarded the bus wearing only pajama pants and brought only a box of crayons, end quote. He offered a friend $1 million to be his alarm clock the next morning, and as the bus arrived in Montana, Hsieh thought a gunman was attacking, causing him to trash the vehicle. He also asked friends to join him in a suicide pact, saying that dying was the best way to transcend human consciousness. His plan? Set the bus on fire with everyone inside. End quote. Reading that initially and just now just gives me chills. This was a guy screaming for help. And he was getting some help from some of his friends, his family, etc. But there are claims, according to insurancenews.net, that Tony set the fire himself, the fire that when he ultimately passed away in the house fire, he set that fire himself. And we may never know that whether that's true or not, but I say this to shout from the rooftops that mental health is so real, folks. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or not. It impacts so many people every single day. So shifting to Tony and his estate planning, well, guess what? Following Tony's passing, there was no estate plan discovered. No last will and testament, no trust, nothing. So here we go again. Tony is a perfect example of so many that we have talked about on Legal Tea. Tony was wealthy. He was likely surrounded by many, many lawyers in his life, and yet he had no estate plan. Why? Well, who knows? We could guess, but that wouldn't do us any good at all. We are left with the fact that he didn't have one, and the facts are there's no will, there's no trust, there's nothing. According to Las Vegas Review-Journal, Tony's father, Richard Hsieh, and brother, Andrew Hsieh, are the ones managing and overseeing Tony's estate. As part of a routine probate estate proceeding, there is a designated point in time where creditors are allowed to make claims on the estate. So basically what happens is the court offers to the public a chance to say, hey, this person owed me X amount of money, and I want paid X amount of money. According to that Las Vegas Review-Journal article, there have been an excess of $150 million in claims filed in Tony's estate. And even beyond that, there are minimally 3 additional litigation cases alleging breach of contract where Tony's estate is a party. According to an Insurance News Net article, quote, Hsieh's father and brother are trying to pull together all the property he bought and promises he made, sometimes on sticky notes, during the months leading to his death, end quote. And let me repeat, yes, that I said sticky notes. I remember in my contract law class in law school talking about one of the most foundational classes about a contract being made on a napkin at a bar. So hey, if the appropriate elements are met to consider the sticky notes contracts, it's not out of the question. Crazy, right? Another big thing occurring in Tony's estate is in regards to all his real estate holdings. Many of his real estate investment properties are in downtown Las Vegas. And the Las Vegas Review-Journal article states it's sort of TBD, to be determined, on what happens to all of those. Some of his properties are boarded up buildings and vacant lots. Some people think that if the estate sells those, it may spark some kind of new shiny development in downtown Las Vegas. Along those lines, Richard and Andrew, Tony's father and brother respectively, the estate representatives, actually have formally filed 100 plus sale notices for various Las Vegas properties and another 20 or so sale notices for properties in Park City, Utah. According to an attorney for the family, the sale notices were filed to, quote, possibly allow for a possible future sale, end quote, and that some of the real estate may not be sold. So yet another big old TBD, to be determined. And I feel like I keep saying, another big thing that occurred in Tony's estate, but there really are just a lot of very random big things that have occurred. So yeah, another example of this is, do you remember when I was talking about all those creditor claims on Tony's estate? Well, one of the biggest creditor claims came from Tony's assistant. Her name was Jennifer, kind of informally called Mimi. According to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Tony and Mimi had been friends for 17 years. Mimi claims many things among several different lawsuits against Tony's estate. Breach of 2 contracts she had with Tony, a claim to, quote, anticipated profit from a venture Tony was starting, and contract interference. The estate's representatives, Richard and Andrew, fired back claiming that she, among a few others, had the, quote, greatest access to Tony, and it was obvious to them and others that Tony was physically and mentally unwell, end quote. In essence, the attorneys for the estate claim that Mimi capitalized on Tony's declining mental health. In terms of where things stand now, I caught an article on 8 News in Las Vegas that a settlement was reached between Mimi and the estate, and that Mimi actually had to pay the estate $750,000, which I honestly thought I was reading incorrectly because she's the one that made creditor claims on the estate. According to the article, there were no other details provided on why the settlement went like this. I suppose this odd situation may be the somewhat perfect way to end this quite odd episode. I'm not sure if I know any more or any less at this point about the estate of Tony Hsieh. I mean, I obviously know more than when I first started researching, but boy, researching and writing this episode caused me to scratch my head several times. Unfortunately, Tony's lack of planning and lack of being organized created many, many problems. With a little bit of planning, he could have very easily provided for who he'd want to get his estate. But because he left no estate plan, that means that his estate is going by the state's intestacy laws, which basically means the state designates who gets what. And another problem of his lack of planning is that his estate will pay so much money in estate taxes. There are ways to allow estates to pass to beneficiaries in a tax-friendly manner. Here, not so much. I'm certain, like so many celebrities that we talk about here on Legal Tea, we'll probably see the IRS question his estate value. And I'm sure it will create a disagreement between the estate's representatives and the IRS. So time will tell. Beyond the total lack of planning, it seems he left things incredibly disorganized too. Like the Post-it note contracts. That very well may make my lawyer brain burst into flames. How does a successful businessman think that Post-it notes are a good way to contract with another party? I mean, don't get me wrong, I use my fair share of Post-it notes, but to make contracts? No. To put super important things on them? No. To remind myself to do X, Y, and Z? Yes, there's a big difference. When we leave things this disorganized, it doesn't magically clean up when we pass away. Someone will have to clean it up. And if there's one thing I hear from my clients, often when they do their estate plan, they do it for the sole purpose to make things easy after they pass. Here with Tony, I'm sure that Tony's dad and brother are pulling their hair out. And that's super sad. Okay, let's wrap this episode up. Next week, we are going to be talking about a cautionary tale episode where we talk about real life clients, real life cases, not celebrity level cases like Tony Hsieh. These real life cases are ones that I or my office have personally worked on. On next week's episode, we're going to be talking about a few different stories and examples of where I have seen beneficiary designations go very, very wrong. And a little insider secret, estate planning is not just about doing documents. It's also about making sure your assets, like ownership-wise and beneficiary designation-wise, support those estate planning documents and that they play nice with those estate planning documents. So yeah, tune in for that next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners. Until then, take care and be well.